The village of Stillwater was built not on fertile soil, but on the stubborn hope that the dead would stay where they belonged. Stillwater was bordered by the necropolis wastes, a stretch of moorland so cold the fog never truly lifted, even in the height of summer. This was the source of the town's grim reputation, where the dead don't sleep. They didn't wander here, they lingered, trapped by the raw magic of the land. Our protagonist was Elias Grave, a man who had traded his academic robes for the heavy, dirt-stained coat of a warden of the border. Elias had been studying the wastes for 2 decades, recording the specific, localized tremors of sorrow and cold that bled into Stillwater's edges. He knew the wastes weren't just haunted. They were a battery, constantly recharging with despair. The source of this energy, Elias theorized, was the Stone of Whispers, an archaic obsidian cairn buried at the waste's geographic center. Local lore claimed the stone was a relic of a forgotten pact, a promise to keep the doors of the afterlife slightly ajar. But lately, the bleed had become a torrent. The cold was deeper, the whispers louder. Children claimed to see shapes in the kitchen steam. Livestock woke up screaming. Elias had a recurring nightmare, the entire wastes dissolving into a single screaming mouth. It was more than just lingering grief. It felt focused, driven by a terrible, intelligent will. The inciting incident arrived on a Tuesday, not with a spectral roar, but with a horrifying silence. Old Man Hemlock, the town's quietest resident, was found rigid in his armchair, his face etched with pure terror. But the fear wasn't the worst part. His house felt like a void, a pocket where sound and light had been forcibly expelled. Elias, alerted by the frantic, silent townsfolk, approached the threshold with trepidation. His brass lantern flickered and died the moment he stepped across the wooden sill. The cold here wasn't temperature, it was the absence of warmth, a primal, chilling emptiness. He found Hemlock, eyes wide and fixed on a wall where something had been scrawled in deep black soot. It wasn't a warning or a threat, but a name. Sepulchre. Elias recognized the name instantly. It belonged to a long-dead cult leader, supposedly buried under the Stone of Whispers millennia ago. Sepulchre was the patron saint of unfinished business, the one who promised to merge the world of the quick and the unquiet. This was no random haunting. This was a deliberate, violent summoning. Someone was actively invoking Sepulchre. Elias retreated, the image of the sooty name burning into his mind. The lingering spirits had been weaponized. He spent the night in his dusty library, pulling out ancient, crumbling maps and treatises on necromancy. His tools were simple: a compass that never pointed north in the wastes, a vial of holy oil that always smelled faintly of burnt cinnamon, and a silver locket holding a lock of his deceased wife's hair. The locket was his anchor. The oil, his only defense? Dawn arrived gray and sickly, offering no warmth to counter the metaphysical chill. Elias packed his bag and, against the pleas of the town council, set off into the necropolis's wastes. The wastes were a world unto themselves, a desolate landscape defined by gnarled, skeletal trees and stagnant pools that reflected nothing but the gray sky. Every step crunched on dry, brittle grass, a sound that felt deafening in the unnatural quiet. The fog was thick and sentient, swirling not with the breeze, but with the presence of unseen entities. Elias could feel them, 100 cold eyes watching from the shifting white. He pressed the silver locket beneath his coat, a silent prayer for fortitude. The compass, as expected, spun wildly, a useless brass toy in a land where directions meant nothing. He navigated by the landmarks known only to Stillwater's oldest, the triple-headed willow, the sunken barrow, and the sheer, unending cold that intensified towards the center. Twice he saw shapes coalesce in the mist shadows that mirrored human forms, but twisted, elongated by some unseen gravity. They didn't attack. They just observed their spectral forms vibrating with malicious curiosity. Elias understood. They weren't hunting him. They were waiting for the stone to grant them permanent passage. He spoke their names silently, the forgotten. Mournful names recorded in Stillwater's ledgers: Agnes, Thomas, little Elara. A small act of recognition, a plea for them to remain dormant just a little longer. The air grew heavier, like walking through liquid lead. The silence was replaced by a low, constant hissing. It was the sound of 1,000 forgotten breaths, the residual noise of life being violently ripped away. He knew he was close to the Stone of Whispers. The stone wasn't a building. It was a gigantic monolithic slab of igneous rock, half-buried and inscribed with runes older than human memory. It sat in a shallow depression, surrounded by smooth black gravel that had been worn down by centuries of unearthly pilgrimage. As Elias crested the final rise, the sight stopped him dead. The stone was not merely cold. It was radiating a pulsing amethyst light that beat like a corrupted heart. And standing before it was not a cultist, but a single figure cloaked in ragged burial linens, a woman, chanting in a dead tongue. She was not Sepulchre, but Sepulchre's instrument, the Weaver. Her voice was thin and reedy, yet it carried immense destructive power. Vibrating the very air around the stone, Elias could see the residual spirits Agnes. Thomas Elleran, longer merely watching, but being pulled towards the stone. They weren't being released. They were being forced into service, becoming the spectral fuel for the Weaver's final ritual. "Stop!" Elias roared, the sound swallowed immediately by the hissing and the Weaver's chant. The Weaver didn't flinch. She simply raised a bony hand, and the mist around her condensed into a shape. It wasn't a whole ghost, but a composite of them, a monstrous, swirling collection of limbs and lost faces. This was the stone's defensive ward, a protective shell woven from the very energy it was harvesting. Elias drew his only weapon, a heavy iron-bound prayer book. He uncorked the vial of holy oil and splashed a dash onto the iron binding. The oil didn't ignite, but it smoked violently, pure white vapor erupting where it touched the iron. He threw the book directly at the composite ward. The moment the sanctified iron hit the spectral wall, there was a shriek not of pain, but of blinding fury. The ward dissolved slightly, giving Elias a precious few seconds to move. He sprinted towards the Weaver, scrambling across the smooth black gravel. The Weaver finally broke her chant, turning her head with agonizing slowness. Her face was impossible skin stretched thin over bone, eyes that were only sockets filled with the amethyst light of the stone. "The Gravekeeper," she hissed, her voice dry as ancient parchment. "You are too late. The gates are open." She raised her hands, now holding a shard of obsidian, the same material as the stone, but shaped like a key. This was the key Elias had read about, the ritual focus that completed the pact. "You cannot use it," Elias gasped, slowing to a halt, just feet away, chest heaving. "It will not bring peace. It will bring the stillness back, but this time it will be permanent. Peace is paralysis." "Gravekeeper," the Weaver said, a cold, empty smile cracking her face. "Sepulchre seeks truth. The truth of eternal life, even if it is eternal suffering." She began plunging the obsidian key into a small, prepared niche in the stone. The amethyst light intensified violently, turning from purple to a searing, destructive white. Elias saw the trapped spirits recoil, screaming not with fury, but with unimaginable pain as their essence was drained. He had no time for debate, no time for tactical thinking. His gaze fell on the silver locket beneath his coat, the lock of hair within. The Weaver was focused on the stone. The stone was focused on the sacrifice. Elias ripped the locket from his neck, his mind screaming against the action. The silver locket, blessed and imbued with a memory of unconditional love, was the purest counteragent he possessed. He didn't throw it. He slammed it with all his remaining strength directly into the Weaver's exposed chest. The impact was quiet, but the reaction was deafening. The Weaver convulsed, the bright white light of the stone momentarily flickering, casting her in a stark shadow. Pure, concentrated love, Evan. The memory of it was poison to the cold emptiness that fueled the ritual. The Weaver shrieked, a sound of agony and rejection, stumbling back from the stone, the obsidian key falling from her grasp. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged past her, his hand closing around the fallen obsidian key. The key pulsed, burning his palm with supernatural cold, trying to drain his living energy, ignoring the searing pain and the return of the Weaver's desperate attacks. With a final, terrible cry, a mixture of grief and triumph, Elias brought the obsidian key down onto the Stone of Whispers. The crack was not a sound. It was a physical blow to the environment, a rupture in the magical atmosphere. The stone did not merely shatter. It imploded, collapsing into a mountain of inert gray dust. The white light vanished. The hissing ceased. For one single perfect moment, the necropolis wastes were absolutely completely silent. The weaver collapsed, her ethereal light fading rapidly, her body turning into a heap of dry, crumbling linen. The assembled spirits Agnes, Thomas Elaruer, momentarily visible, confused and directionless. Then, with a sigh of relief that rustled the dead grass, they were gone. It's not banished, but finally, truly asleep. Elias stood in the center of the silent crater, his hand throbbing, the broken obsidian key fragments littering the ground. He had broken the stone, but the price was heavy. The silver locket was gone, incinerated in the blinding shockwave. His anchor was lost. It was alive, but the world felt wrong, quieter, more fragile than before. The necropolis wastes were no longer a battery for malevolent magic, but they were still haunted. They were haunted by the memory of the stone, haunted by the knowledge of what had nearly been unleashed. Elias Grave had saved Stillwater, but he was now irrevocably bound to the wastes he swore to guard. He would forever feel the cold, forever hear the phantom echo of a single agonizing shriek, but the dead were sleeping. And for Elias, that was enough. He slowly turned, placing one weary foot in front of the other, and began the long walk back to the town built on hope. The fog began to roll in again, but this time it was just fog. It's the smallest of victories and the largest of dark fantasies. The darkness had been averted, but the silence he brought back was a chilling promise that the struggle was far from over. He knew that somewhere in the deep earth beneath the shattered stone, sepulchre was still waiting. And Elias Grave, the warden of the living and the unquiet, would be waiting too. If you enjoyed the chilling silence of Stillwater, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more dark fantasies and chilling tales from worlds where the dead don't sleep.